Welcome to a special segment of the Silky Smooth Sounds of the Green and Red podcast. I'm your co-host, Scott Parkin in Berkeley, California, and we're super excited to be joined by our special guest today. But as always, I'm joined by...
Bob in Ohio.
Yep. And today we are joined, as you've been seeing, we've been rolling out a series of video clips and at least one longer interview around the 92nd birthday of Noam Chomsky, Professor Noam Chomsky. And so now we are talking with our longtime friend and collaborator, Hep Ingham, who happens also to be the executive producer of the Green and Red podcast. Welcome to Green and Red, Hep.
That just means I was the first one to donate on Patreon.
Yeah, we just broke.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So,
and you hook us up with some of our guests.
Yeah.
So Hep, talking today about Noam Chomsky, I would say actually some of my kind of like earliest. It wasn't the first time I heard of Noam Chomsky by any means, but like kind of like early conversations, like kind of thinking about his influences were with both you and Bob. And so maybe we could start off with a little bit of some of what you think are some of his influences, talk maybe a little bit about some of your interactions with him, et cetera. You know his work quite well and you know him a little bit, so.
Yeah, I mean, you can't overestimate the influence that he's had. He and Ed Herman and Howard Zinn were sort of the three pillars that as soon as I got radicalized after listening to Gore Vidal on Jerry Brown's show back in 1995, I guess it was. This is when Jerry was still a lefty, or was temporarily a lefty, so he could get his Pacifica show. But I heard Gore Vidal talk about Guatemala, and then it just fell into place for me. And so I was in Boulder, and I hooked up with Barsamian because he was alternative radio was playing on KPFT, and so I looked him up, and he gave me a reading list. And the first book I read was Year 501, and I think that was published in like '92 or something around there.
Yeah,
but anyway, that was
anniversary.
eye opener, and a lot of people complain about Chomsky's writing style, but to me it was so logical and straightforward that it's just a sledgehammer with facts and logic, and all of a sudden you can see how the whole system works from one of his books. A few years later, I subscribed to Z magazine, of which Chomsky and Herman were submitting like monthly, and at that time, and I signed up for the Z Media Institute, and which was held up at Woods Hole, and this was in '98. So I went up there, and I was on my way to Europe, so I thought I'd stop off and do ZMI, and it was like a 10-day thing, so the Friday of the week they have Chomsky Day, so Noam shows up and he gives a couple little classes, and you get to talk to him, and so I had some interaction with him at the class. Talking about revolution and the difference between the guys who write the Militant versus the guys who write for Z Magazine and Monthly Review. And, he was a real sweet, nice guy answering all the questions. And then, but what I happened to notice was he was wearing these kind of leather shoes that were kind of cream colored. And so that's important because later on in the day, I was in the bathroom and in the stall, and someone came into the stall next to me, and I recognized the shoes. And I said, you know what, I'm just going to wait here until Noam comes out so I can talk to him while we wash our hands. I assumed that he was going to wash his hands. And so we're in there, and we come out, and I had a copy of this MIT review. It's like a quarterly magazine from MIT, and on the cover was, the soul of American corporations. What makes these companies different? And some guy had written this hagiography to, it was like Levi Strauss, Hewlett Packard, Boeing. So and Noam, and we both come out, and I held up the magazine. I showed it to Noam. I said, Noam, next time you see this guy in the quadrangle, you can yell at him because he's kind of forgetting the whole public subsidy, private profit thing about these corporations. And he kind of looked at it. He said, oh yeah, I haven't read this yet. Now, can I borrow it? And I said, sure, no problem. And so we, this was on the way to this big lecture that he's giving for ZMI with about 400 people at the big auditorium there. And so we had about a 8-minute walk between the outhouse and the lecture. And we were just talking about militarization and how it passed on to avionics and tourism, and the privatization of all the military costs had basically made the whole airline industry. And I was asking some stuff about David Noble, profit over people. And, of course, he would say stuff, oh yeah, you go to page 107, and forward, and that'll be the answer to those questions. And anyway, we started talking about the conversion of, I think it was the K-130 tanker, which became the 707. And that was basically what started commercial jet travel on a large scale. And I was interested in it. And so we're talking about it. And then I asked him about, Matthew Rothschild, the editor for The Progressive, had just published a piece saying that Chomsky's apologies for Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge was not one of his better moments. And I said, hey, what is with Rothschild? It's like he hasn't read any of your other stuff that you guys published with Herman about this. And he just said, yeah, I don't know, that's just a bunch of shit. I don't know what he's saying in that, a bunch of crap. And I'm just like, yeah, all right, Chomsky, a regular guy. And so anyway, we're still talking, and he was going to give me some reference. And he said, well, I've got to get up there and give my talk. And so he walks up there, and I'm at the very back of the room, and this auditorium is filled. And he walks all the way up there, he's like got his papers out, and then all of a sudden he looks up and he walks all the way back. And he comes back, and I'm not sure what he's doing. Anyway, he walks up to me and says, oh yeah, so that thing about the KC, the conversion of the jet, that's in this book. If you look at page like 240, FF, then you'll get the references to that. And that's the best place to start if you're doing any work on that. I thought, oh, okay, well, you better get up there. You're supposed to talk. He says, yeah, I'll be up there. Anyway, I think that just kind of, that's just sort of the nature of the guy. Is he just, he'll make the Nobel laureate, as the people have said, wait in the hallway while he talks to the high school student. And I was the high school student in this case, and he's just that kind of a guy. And that was my first interaction with the Gnomester. And then since then I got all his tapes from Barsamian, because I donated some money to AR, and so he just started sending me all these cassette tapes, because I hadn't moved into the CD world yet, and neither had Barsamian. And so I had a massive cassette tapes, but there was one in particular that I listened to, and that was The Right Turn. It was a lecture he gave at Boulder, CU Boulder, in 1986. And for some reason, I just kept listening to it over and over and over, and I basically had it memorized, where I even had Chomsky's where he stuttered here and there, or he had a problem with the letter H on a few words. And anyway, but from that, I was able to just memorize all the stuff that he said, and it turned out I could use it almost everywhere, because it applies universally. And I think that was my first Chomsky moment. And then the second Chomsky moment came when his speech at the University of Houston, I think that was in 2002.
Yeah, October
of 2002. So, and I think he spoke about Cuba or just kind of imperialism in general.
Yeah, it also was the ramp up to the war against Iraq.
Yeah,
so
right. We'll get some orange juice. So I brought him over to my apartment. I was over there by the Bayou in Alameda Street. And So we came inside and he went and sat down and I started talking to him. And I gave him some orange juice and Lovey, our Sheltie, came up and started nuzzling him. But maybe he likes dogs now, but at that time he kind of pulled away from her a little bit. And then anyway, we're talking and I said, you know what, Noam, I've got this PDF of 15 of your books from this company called Electric Book, that they don't sell in the US. And he said, yeah, I'm not aware of that. I don't have a copy of it. And I said, well, come on back. So we went back to my bedroom, which didn't have anywhere to sit. So he just sat on my bed and we worked on the computer. And I burned him a CD with the PDF. And he said, well, I don't know how to use it. I said, yeah, just get Carol to load it on your hard drive. And I heard later from Barsamian that he was using it because all the references from all his writings were hyperlinked. And so he could instantly go to any of them, copy it, and reuse it. And so I felt like I had helped the master one step higher. And then, so we went up back to the kitchen. He was finishing his orange juice. And I looked at him and said, hey, no, I got a little present for you. It was supposed to be for your 70th birthday, but I never sent it to you. And he looked at me kind of like I had an asshole right in the middle of my forehead, and which was appropriate. And then, so anyway, I gave him this book, and it was Let the People Think by Bertrand Russell. He goes, oh, this is great because I have a Bertrand Russell conference next week. I've never read this before. And I said, all right. And so then this whole time my phone's blowing up because Bazanco's been trying to call me to get him there for his press conference. But I just said, Noam has to recharge with orange juice, a little downtime, since Herb didn't feed him or anything. And so I ignored the phone calls, loaded him up in the Chevy and drove him to the back of the auditorium. And he just said, is there like a quiet room where I can sit down and, I just want to, kind of think, get ready for this. And I just thought, a brain that powerful, that awesome, probably needs just a little quiet time just to collect itself before it goes to town. So I led him to this little office in the back there. And he was 75 at the time, and I kind of offered to help him down the stairs. And he like, I don't need your help. And I said, yeah, this is one tough SOB. And so, I took him to the room and shut the door. And then I found Bob and said, yeah, Noam's out back. Bob was like, he missed his press conference. I said, no, he needed to recharge. So anyway, and that was those are my two Noam experiences with the master. And
I have to,
glad I could assist him.
You're the only person who would ever hold parties and instead of playing music, play Chomsky tapes. Remember the infamous pork chop parties?
Yeah.
The pork chop parties over, I forget what that street was over there in the museum district. But no, I think what you said, and that's a common thread. It's, he could have a Nobel Prize winner waiting to talk to him, and he'll talk to who was ever there. The first time I actually met him, I was in Maryland, and I went to a talk at the University of Maryland. And afterward, everybody's bum rushing it, and we had actually written by mail, the old-fashioned way. And I don't know how he knew who I was, or if I don't know what, but in front of all these people, he said, Bob. I said, yeah. He said, do you want to have breakfast tomorrow? Oh. And I was like, I was the shit, man. And the next morning, I was amazed because Noam Chomsky eats eggs like the rest of us do, but I told him about an article I just read about water rights in Palestine, and he started grilling me on it, and I was terrified. It was way worse than PhD orals. Because, I don't want this guy to think I'm an idiot. I know I am, but I don't want him to think it. So, but no, he was just so gracious and kind. And, he just takes everybody seriously. It could be a high school newspaper, wanting an interview with him. Just everybody we've talked to, Barsami and Clinton, everybody I've ever talked to about him has the same experience. It's just remarkable. No ego, just incredibly graceful and helpful. I know he doesn't like adulation. He doesn't like this kind of recognition, but, it's tough times, and he's inspired. I don't know. who the hell knows how many people.
Oh, yeah.
The other day, I don't know if I was talking to Scott or to Clinton, and so this is a repeat story, but I was in Venice in 2018 teaching. I've been there twice. And in the second or third class, I forget what I said, but I mentioned Chomsky, and the students all nodded approvingly. I said, you know who he is? And they all laughed at me like, of course we know who he is. These are 18, 19-year-old Italian kids. And I just said, in the United States, I don't think I mean, maybe one out of my class of 300, one or two. So it's just really remarkable what he's done. And I've said this again in all of our shows, he's been in the streets of Belfast, defending the IRA in Palestine. He was in Turkey right before he came to Houston. I remember I've said this again, but Bev, I was talking to her, he's going to be in Turkey. I said, well, tell him, because I think his publisher was on trial. I said, well, he better be careful, because he needs to come to Houston after that. So he can't get arrested in Turkey. I can't have him in a Turkish jail.
Yeah.
He's going to be Houston. So, but no, just a really remarkable guy. And I know it's become kind of vogue on some elements of the left now to criticize him and attack him. And, he can defend himself. He sure as hell doesn't need us. He can do it way better than we can anyway. But I just think it's more of a kind of a collective abandonment of this idea of solidarity and what he's actually meant to whether it be socialist or anarchist or Marxist or liberals or conservatives or whoever. It's there's something in there for everybody to learn from.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I know going forward, I know you've turned. I remember like I said at your parties, but so many people like Tom and Dara and others, became aware of what he was doing and aware of the world as a result of that, and it just creates this exchange, this conveyor belt that'll go on for centuries after we're gone.
Yeah, no, his body of work is so tight and so profound that you're right, it'll have an influence for centuries. I should say that he's not a person you want to waste his time.
No.
And, after I would have these, I got his email. I think I got his email, his top secret one from Moynihan, Chomsky2@mit.edu. And so I just read this Pathfinder book. I think it was about Debs or socialism or something. I can't remember. But anyway, it had a comment in there about who's the historian for Kennedy? What's that called? Schlesinger. So there's some comment in there about Schlesinger. So I wrote a stupid email Noam, just wrote, when did Schlesinger become a toady for the establishment? So he wrote back, did you mean his father? And if not, he was a very fine man and moral and upstanding and and a very good scholar. And but he kind of wrapped my knuckles. So I never ever wrote him again unless I absolutely had to.
Yeah.
I needed a reference or something like that I couldn't find anywhere else.
Yeah.
And so yeah.
No, he could be. At the same time, though, I remember
be up to him with BS because he'll kick you.
Yeah, I once I was talking to him about Hans Morgenthau. I was a really well-known political scientist, but an establishment favorite, and Noam spoke very well of him. I mean, that's the thing. There's no
really likes Hans. He really likes.
He's not dogmatic. There's not this sectarian bullshit. So it was just you can obviously trust him. And as I've said again, there have been times when anytime you're in academia, you're dealing with some people who are very difficult to deal with. And, kind of knowing that I've had these interactions with him and he's given me good advice and spoken well of some of the things I've written has always helped get over the fact that, I'm dealing with a lot of people who I really, don't like. So,
I would say as a person, I've been, as y'all know, I've been in organizing, campaigning world, in that part of the left for 2 decades at this point. And the two things that I think of when I think of Noam Chomsky, I think of one, his critique of, the status quo, whether it's the foreign policy establishment, corporate America, what have you, which I actually feel like is really important and at a certain level has been lost on the in the current left. And I think Chomsky has brought that for many decades. And the other part is like what we've been talking about is that like he is like one of those kind of rare public intellectuals who also engages in that sort of like activist organizing sort of world. Now it's mostly where he's like does sign-ons and he like kind of like talks about the importance of an Occupy Wall Street or a Standing Rock or the anti-Trump movement. And like where like a lot of academics, don't, and they're definitely many have run to the center in the kind of like last couple of decades. But like he, he's really known for being at the 1967 March on the Pentagon and going to jail for that, and then after that, turning his like sort of professional career into like what things that activists can use to kind of fuel their resistance to the corporate status quo. I think that, from my generation of activists, which is by far not the newest at this point, is like, I think that's been like a really important sort of like, it's a sort of pillar to me, is that when we have public intellectuals which support people in the streets. And I think that's been a really important thing that we just from the interviews that we've been doing the last couple of weeks and kind of building up to today, I think that's actually a really important thing.
I always remember the interchange that I heard from Norman Finkelstein. I think he was on the show with Paul Jay. He was interviewing him, and they were talking about Chomsky. And, Finkelstein used to be a Maoist in his early days. And so he was talking to Noam about that. And Noam told him, look, you don't need a theory. What you really need are facts and evidence. And if you collect all that together, that's what you can use to, present your motives. And I think that's a good point, because I still don't really know what a Maoist is, but just like Noam disabuse people of their love for the Leninists, just because he knows the history around Lenin, prior to the revolution, then when he took power using his progressive writing, and then after he took power, and then they went and crushed all the Soviets and in Kronstadt, and created a labor army, and went against probably Marx's what he really wanted to achieve with communist revolution. But this is the kind of thing that Chomsky, just because he's read everything and he can interpret it correctly, and so it just saves everybody a ton of time.
Yeah, he's been in Hanoi, he's been in Havana, he's been in Laos, he's been in Managua. He doesn't just sit in his office and write fancy books and become idolized for it. So thank you. It's good talking to you again, and say hi to Mary, and we'll have to get you back on, and continue to book good interviews for us. So.
Yeah, and thanks for everything that you do, Hep, and thanks for being the executive producer of the Green and Red podcast.
All right.